Hey there, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and how long you've been with me. And if these stories help you sleep, don't forget to subscribe. The sun was slipping below the horizon, the last rays of daylight casting long shadows across the narrow back road. I glanced at Annabeth beside me, her face softened by the warm glow of twilight. We were headed back to the ranch, taking the scenic route, just me, her, and the old 2000 Chevy that had been through more adventures than I could count. It was my brother's truck before he sold it to me, and it had never given us a single problem until tonight. The engine coughed once, then sputtered before dying completely. I muttered a curse under my breath, easing the truck to a stop. Annabeth looked at me, her eyebrows knitting in concern. "What's wrong?" she asked. I shook my head. "No idea. It's never done this before." I popped the hood, stepping out into the growing darkness. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The forest around us seemed to deepen as night settled in, the shadows thickening into something almost tangible. I leaned over the engine, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, but everything looked fine. I was no stranger to this truck. My brother had made sure I knew it inside and out. Still, nothing seemed amiss. 5 minutes passed, and I heard the door creak open. Annabeth stepped out, her voice tinged with frustration. "Did you call me?" I frowned, glancing up at her. "No, I didn't say anything." Her face paled slightly, and she crossed her arms over her chest, a nervous habit I'd seen 100 times before. "I swear I heard you. You called my name." A chill ran down my spine, but I forced a smile, trying to ease her nerves. "Probably just the wind," I said, though I wasn't so sure myself. There was something about the way the forest had gone silent, like it was holding its breath, that set me on edge. Annabeth got back in the truck, and I returned to the engine, but my concentration was shot. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of a leaf, made me look over my shoulder, expecting to see something. I didn't know what. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft but clear. My own voice calling Annabeth's name. My heart pounded, and I looked towards the truck. Annabeth was already out again, her face a mask of confusion and fear. "Stop messing with me," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear, I didn't say anything." My voice was barely a whisper, and that was when I heard it. A low growl coming from somewhere behind me. I turned, and my blood ran cold. A figure stood in the darkness, just beyond the reach of the truck's headlights. It was tall, hunched, with limbs that seemed too long, bending at odd angles. Its eyes glowed, reflecting the dim light, and its mouth curled into what might have been a smile, if it weren't so grotesque. It looked like a coyote, but wrong, distorted, as if something had twisted it into a mockery of what it once was. It took a step forward, and Annabeth screamed. The thing moved faster than I could react, slamming a hand, no, a paw, against the back of the truck. The metal buckled under the force, and I saw Annabeth duck down inside, her eyes wide with terror. I reached into the truck, grabbing the knife from the center console, the one Hecht had blessed, carving symbols into the bone hilt. The creature's eyes flicked to the blade, and for a moment it hesitated. It stared at me, then at the knife, and I swear I heard it. Annabeth's voice pleading, "Please, no." Something snapped inside me. I lunged, slashing at the creature. The blade connected, and it let out a scream that echoed through the woods, a sound that was part woman, part beast. It stumbled back, its grotesque smile replaced by a look of pure rage. Then it turned and ran, vanishing into the darkness, its screams fading into the night. I stood there, panting, the knife still in my hand. My heart was racing, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Annabeth called my name, her voice trembling, and I turned back to the truck. I climbed in, throwing the knife onto the dash, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, as if nothing had ever been wrong. We drove back to the ranch in silence, the tires kicking up dirt and gravel as I pushed the truck faster, desperate to put as much distance between us and whatever that thing was. Hecht was waiting when we got there, his face grim as he listened to our story. He nodded, as if he had expected this, and without a word, he began the ritual, burning sage, spreading ashes, his voice low as he chanted words I didn't understand. When he finished, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a seriousness that made my stomach twist. "Keep her close," he said, nodding towards Annabeth. "This isn't over." And deep down, I knew he was right. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't done with us. Not yet. It must have been past midnight when I heard it. A slow, deliberate scratching at the window. The kind of sound that worms its way into your dreams until you can't ignore it any longer. My eyes shot open, my heart already racing. The room was dark, shadows dancing across the ceiling from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. For a second, I thought I must have imagined it. But then it came again, a scraping sound, like nails dragged across glass. I turned to see Annabeth already awake, her wide eyes staring at me. She whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. The scratching came again, and I felt my stomach twist into a knot. It wasn't an animal, not a raccoon, or some stray cat. It was too deliberate, too persistent, like something that knew we were in here and wanted us to know it too. "Stay here," I said, slipping out of bed as quietly as I could. Annabeth reached for my arm, her grip tight. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, grabbing the blessed knife from the nightstand, the bone hilt cool in my hand. Moving slowly, I crossed the room to the door and eased it open, stepping into the hallway. The house was dark, the only light coming from the dim glow of the moon through the windows. Every creak of the floorboards seemed deafening as I made my way towards the living room. Hecht was already there, standing by the front door, his eyes narrowed as he listened. He turned to me, nodding slightly as if he'd been expecting me. "It's here," he said, his voice low. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my ears. "What do we do?" He gestured towards the gun cabinet. "Get the Winchester, and the 9mm. I moved quickly, opening the cabinet and grabbing the weapons. Hecht took the rifle from me, his movements steady, unhurried. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small pouch of ashes. He spread them across the rifle's barrel, murmuring an incantation under his breath. His eyes closed in concentration. The scratching at the window grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever was out there, it wasn't going to wait much longer. Hecht handed me the 9mm, the cool metal heavy in my hand. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a calm determination that somehow steadied my own nerves. "We face it," he said. "That's the only way." We stepped out onto the porch, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. The world outside was silent, the kind of silence that felt wrong, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Hecht moved to the edge of the porch, his eyes scanning the darkness, the rifle held steady. I stayed close, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, every rustle of leaves making my pulse quicken. Then I saw them, hoof-like prints in the dirt, glowing faintly under the moonlight. They led away from the porch, towards the tree line. My gaze followed the trail, and that was when I saw it. The Skinwalker stood at the edge of the trees, half hidden in the darkness. Its twisted form seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, its glowing eyes locked onto mine. A wave of anger washed over me, the same anger I'd felt on the road, and I raised the 9mm, aiming straight at its chest. My finger tightened on the trigger, but nothing happened. The gun refused to fire, the trigger stuck, as if frozen in place. Panic surged through me, but Hecht was already moving. He raised the rifle, his voice low as he chanted something I couldn't understand. He fired, the crack of the shot echoing through the stillness, and the Skinwalker let out a guttural scream, its body collapsing backwards. For a moment, everything was still. Then slowly, the creature began to rise, its eyes burning with hatred. It stared at us, its mouth opening in a twisted smile, before it turned and disappeared into the woods, its form swallowed by the shadows. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, my hands trembling as I lowered the useless 9mm. Hecht turned to me, his expression grim. "It's not over," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This thing, it will keep coming. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just some random encounter. This was a fight that had only just begun. And deep down, I knew we were far from finished. The next morning came with an uneasy stillness, the kind of quiet that made every little sound echo louder, every creak in the floorboard feel ominous. Annabeth stayed asleep, her breathing steady, but I hadn't closed my eyes since the encounter. My mind kept replaying the image of the Skinwalker, its twisted body rising, the hatred in its glowing eyes. I knew it wasn't over. It was still out there, and it wouldn't stop. Hecht was in the kitchen, the scent of sage lingering in the air from the ritual the night before. He looked up as I entered, nodding to me with a grim expression. There wasn't much to say, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. It was a mixture of exhaustion, determination, and something I could only describe as understanding. He knew this fight wasn't one that would end easily. We need to be ready, Hecht said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. It will come back, and it will be more desperate. I nodded, running my fingers over the bone hilt of the knife still in my hand. It had become a part of me now, a comfort in a world that had suddenly turned dark and uncertain. Just as I was about to respond, a knock on the door made both of us freeze. The sound was heavy, urgent. I opened the door to find Sheriff Daniels standing there, his face pale and drawn. He was the kind of man who usually carried himself with a steady authority, the kind who'd seen enough trouble not to be rattled easily. But today, there was fear in his eyes. We got a situation, he said, his voice gravelly. He glanced at Hecht, then back at me. Your neighbor, Mrs. Lowell. She's dead. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Mrs. Lowell had always been kind to us. She lived just a few miles west of our ranch, a widow who kept mostly to herself, but always had a smile when she saw us. I swallowed hard, the air suddenly feeling too thick to breathe. What happened? Sheriff Daniels hesitated, his eyes flicking to Hecht before he spoke. Looks like she was shot, but there's something else, something strange. Her place was torn up, like an animal got in, but no tracks, no sign of anyone or anything. Hecht's expression darkened, and he stepped forward. It wasn't an animal, he said, his voice calm, but edged with something sharp. Not in the way you think. The sheriff gave him a wary look. He'd always been skeptical of Hecht's beliefs, but there was something about the situation that left him without an argument. He nodded slowly, then turned back to me. You folks need to be careful. Whatever this is, it's not done. I felt a chill run through me, a cold certainty settling in my bones. Mrs. Lowell's death was no coincidence. It was a message. The Skinwalker was escalating, becoming bolder, more dangerous. And it was my fault. I had faced it, driven it away, and now it was lashing out at those around me. As the sheriff left, Hecht and I stood on the porch, staring out at the horizon, where the line of trees stood like silent sentinels. We need to prepare, Hecht said, his voice breaking the silence. This fight is bigger than just us now. It's coming for anyone it can reach. I nodded, my jaw tightening. There was no running from this, no hiding. Whatever the Skinwalker was, whatever it wanted, it wasn't going to stop until one of us was dead. I thought of Annabeth, still sleeping in the other room, and the fear I had felt the night before morphed into something else. Determination. What do we do? I asked, my voice steady, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. Hecht looked at me, his eyes filled with the kind of resolve that came from years of knowledge and experience. We fight it. We bless every weapon, every doorway, every inch of this place. We call upon the spirits for protection, and we don't let our fear give it power. I swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. This was real, a battle that had been forced on us, one we couldn't walk away from. I looked towards the tree line, where the shadows seemed to stretch endlessly, and I made a silent promise to protect Annabeth, to protect this ranch, and to see this through, no matter what. The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. We blessed the weapons, the doorways, and every corner of the house. Hecht's chants filled the air, his voice steady, unwavering. The sun began to dip below the horizon once again, and I knew that nightfall would bring another confrontation. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, I stood on the porch, the blessed rifle in my hands, my eyes scanning the tree line. The world was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I could feel it. Somewhere out there, the Skinwalker was watching, waiting, and this time, I would be ready. It was one of those sweltering summer nights, the kind where the air feels heavy, and you're dripping with sweat just sitting still. I had abandoned my room upstairs because it felt like an oven, and instead found solace in the coolness of the basement. Down there, beneath the house, away from the smothering heat, I had my own little setup, the PS4, the old couch, and that big window that looked out onto the backyard. Normally, it felt like my own private hideaway, but something about that window felt different lately, too exposed, like it wasn't just me who could look out into the night. That's when the howls started. The first night I heard it, I figured it was just coyotes. They often howled at night, somewhere beyond the woods that bordered our property. But this howl was different. It wasn't a quick yip or a high-pitched yowl like the coyotes usually made. No, this one was low, guttural, like it was echoing from deep within something. It seemed to stretch on forever, a sound that rippled through the trees, the walls, my bones. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just an old coyote gone rogue. I wanted to believe that. Every night it came back, the howling, and every night it sounded closer. 1 minute, it seemed to be right outside the woods, the next, farther off, then suddenly close again, as if whatever it was, it could move faster than anything had a right to. I could hear it shifting, circling, and though I couldn't see a thing beyond the glass, I felt it, that presence, stalking just out of view, as if it knew I was there and wanted me to know that too. It was a Wednesday night, I remember that. The heat was unbearable upstairs, so there I was, sprawled out on the couch, letting the basement's coolness settle over me. I had Thor, Ragnarok, playing on the screen. I had seen it a dozen times already, but it was just background noise, something to drown out the tension that had been growing. That's when I heard it, a tapping at the window. I froze. A single tap, light as a fingertip, almost polite. My heart stopped for a beat, and I stared at the dark outline of the window, too afraid to move. I told myself it was a bird, maybe something startled out of the woods. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The second tap came, more forceful, a deliberate knock, as if something, someone, wanted me to open that curtain. Slowly, my body acting against every screaming instinct in my mind, I shifted toward the window. The curtain rustled under my trembling hand. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, and pulled the fabric aside. The face, that face, elongated, no lips, only jagged teeth like something sharpened them to points. Empty black holes where eyes should have been, the skin hanging in loose folds, decaying and cracked. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move. It was smiling, or at least that's what it seemed to be doing, its head tilted, those teeth bared. My scream came out as a strangled gasp, and before I knew it, I was scrambling up the stairs, every nerve in my body alight with terror. My father's voice called out from the dark hallway, but I barely registered it. I only stopped when I reached his room, my voice breaking as I told him what I saw. He followed me back down, muttering something about nightmares. But when we got there, the window was empty, nothing but the faint condensation from where its breath had fogged the glass. I wanted to believe my father, that it was just a bad dream, a trick of my overactive imagination. But as I lay in my room that night, every door locked, the heat pressing down like a suffocating blanket, I knew. I knew that whatever was out there, it was real, and it was waiting. The basement had always been my retreat, the place I went to when I needed to get away from the chaos of the house. But after that night, it felt like the walls had grown too thin, like the darkness outside could reach in at any moment. It was the tapping that had done it. Those two gentle knocks, deliberate and knowing. No matter how much I tried to convince myself it was just a bird, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there knew me, had watched me, and wanted me to know it was there. It was a couple of nights later when I decided to go back down. The heat in my room was unbearable, and my father's dismissive words still echoed in my head. I wanted to prove, to myself more than anyone, that it had been a nightmare. So I gathered my blanket and pillow and crept back downstairs, telling myself that it was just another night. Nothing would happen. I turned on the PS4, loaded up Netflix, and settled in. But I couldn't relax. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the window made me flinch. My eyes kept darting to that window, expecting, almost daring, that face to appear again. I wanted to prove it wasn't real, but every inch of me was braced for that sickening grin. It was halfway through the movie when I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a tap. It was a scrape. The sound of something dragging across the glass, slow and deliberate. My blood ran cold. I sat frozen, staring at the window, my heart pounding in my ears. The scrape came again, and then a third time, like nails being dragged across the pane. I could feel my body trembling, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. I was caught in that moment, paralyzed by fear. The scraping stopped. Silence. I strained to hear, every muscle tense, waiting. Then a soft thud. My stomach lurched as I realized it had come from the back door, the one that led out to the yard. The door was locked, but in that moment, I felt the air grow thick with a kind of primal terror. Something was out there, something that wasn't content to just stay by the window. It wanted in. My hand moved before I realized it, reaching for the remote. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into darkness. I listened, every breath shallow, my heart feeling like it might explode out of my chest. The soft rustle of movement outside, something brushing against the door. My eyes locked on the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. But it didn't. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Slowly, the rustling faded, the presence slipping away into the night. I let out a shaky breath, tears stinging my eyes. I knew then that this wasn't just some figment of my imagination. Whatever was out there, it was real, and it wasn't going away. I crept back up the stairs, my legs barely able to hold me. I locked every door, every window, and crawled into bed, pulling the blanket over my head like a child. I knew it was still out there, waiting, watching, and I knew that somehow it wouldn't be satisfied until it found a way in. The days that followed were a blur of sleeplessness and unease. The memory of that face, those empty eye sockets and that twisted grin, seemed to haunt me even in the daylight. Every shadow seemed a little darker, every creak of the old house a little more sinister. My parents went about their days like nothing had happened, like the terror I'd experienced was just some bad dream. But I knew better. I could feel it, an invisible thread that tied me to whatever was out there, lurking just beyond the walls of our house. It wasn't just the nights that were unbearable now. It was the days, too. The oppressive summer heat only seemed to intensify my paranoia. I found myself constantly glancing out the windows, searching the tree line for any sign of movement. The basement, once a place of comfort, had become a place of dread. I couldn't bring myself to go back down there, not even in the midday sun when everything should have felt safe. The dog was the first to notice it. Rusty was never one to bark without reason, but now he would stand at the top of the basement stairs growling low, the hair on his back standing straight up. He refused to go near the door that led outside, and every time he growled, that same chill would creep up my spine. He knew something was out there, something he couldn't see, but could sense. One night, after another failed attempt at sleep, I heard it again. The sound was so faint at first, I thought I was imagining it. A soft, rhythmic scratching, like nails dragging slowly across wood. It was coming from the back door. My mouth went dry, and I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The scratching stopped, replaced by a soft rustle, like something brushing against the side of the house. My heart raced, and I felt the now familiar terror grip me. I crept out of bed, each step careful and deliberate, trying not to make a sound. My hands were trembling as I moved toward the window. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I needed to know. I pulled the curtain back just an inch, my eyes peering out into the darkness. For a moment all I saw was the empty yard, the shadows cast by the trees swaying in the breeze. But then I saw it. Movement, just at the edge of the tree line. Something tall, hunched, moving slowly between the trees. The figure stopped, its head turning, as if it knew I was watching. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could hear it. The creature's head tilted, just like it had that night at the window, and even from this distance, I could see the glint of those jagged teeth. I dropped the curtain and stumbled back, my chest tightening with fear. It was still out there. It had never left. And now, it knew that I knew. It was playing a game, and I was the prey. I locked my bedroom door, my hands shaking, and crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket over me like it could somehow protect me from what was outside. I could still hear the soft rustle of movement, the scratching at the back door, like a promise that it would return. I knew I couldn't keep hiding forever. Whatever it was, it wouldn't stop until it found a way in, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it out. The house looked different that evening. It felt different. My sister Olivia and I had spent the day in town, escaping the oppressive heat and boredom of our isolated corner of the world. By the time we returned, the sun had dipped below the treetops, and the long shadows stretched like fingers, wrapping the old house in a shroud of darkness. Something about the stillness made me hesitate as I reached for the door handle. "Do you think Mom's okay?" Olivia whispered, staring at the darkened house. The lights were off, even though Mom should have been home for hours. "Of course," I replied, but even I didn't believe my words. I pushed the door open, and a blast of cold air hit me, sending a shiver down my back. Inside, it was dark, too dark, the kind of dark that makes you second-guess every step. I flipped the switch, but nothing happened. The power was out. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself was tense. "Mom," I called, my voice swallowed by the silence. Olivia stayed close, her phone light cutting through the darkness. The beam swept over picture frames and furniture, which seemed oddly out of place, as if they had shifted while we were gone. "Mom, are you here?" Olivia called, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence was deafening. The hairs on my neck stood on end, a chill creeping through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. Then we heard it, a voice, distant, muffled, coming from outside. "Is that—" Olivia turned towards the back door, her eyes wide. It was Mom, or at least, it sounded like her. But something was wrong. The words were garbled, as if she was speaking underwater. Without thinking, we moved toward the sound, pushing open the back door and stepping into the night. The woods loomed before us, a black wall of trees swallowing the last of the daylight. Mom's voice drifted through the branches, a strange sing-song quality to it, like she was calling us deeper. I hesitated at the edge of the trees. Dad had always warned us about the deep woods, about getting lost out there, especially at night. But this was Mom. She needed us. Olivia didn't wait. She switched on her phone light and stepped forward, her feet crunching on the dead leaves. I followed, my heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. The deeper we went, the stranger it became. The air grew colder, the trees twisted, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The shadows shifted, and I could have sworn I saw shapes darting between the trunks, just beyond the reach of our light. "Mom?" I called, my voice cracking, the sound swallowed by the darkness. Then we heard it, a scream. High-pitched, terrified, unmistakably Mom's. It echoed through the woods, bouncing off the trees until I couldn't tell where it had come from. "We have to go," Olivia said, panic in her voice. She started running, her flashlight bouncing wildly. I ran after her, branches whipping against my face, the ground uneven beneath my feet. The woods seemed to close in around us, the trees growing thicker, their trunks like bars in a cage. Then we saw it. A clearing opened up ahead, and there, in the center, stood something that shouldn't exist. It was tall, at least 8 feet. Its head a skull, with flesh hanging in ragged strips, black sockets glowing with an unnatural red light. The body was a grotesque mix of bones and rotting flesh, its limbs twisted and wrong, like someone had assembled it without ever seeing a living thing. And the smell, oh God, the smell. It was death and decay, so thick I could taste it. The creature turned its head toward us, the empty sockets locking onto mine. My blood ran cold. It grinned, yellow fangs glinting in the darkness, and took a step forward, its body shifting, dissolving into shadow. The red eyes remained, floating towards us, the grin growing wider, more sinister. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Olivia's arm. We turned and ran, the world blurring around us, branches tearing at our clothes, roots grabbing at our feet. Behind us, I could hear it. The heavy thud of footsteps, the rustle of leaves, the low, guttural growl that seemed to echo inside my head. The deep woods were alive, whispering, mocking, and I knew, without a doubt, that we were not supposed to be there. The lights of the house came into view, flickering through the trees, and I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning, my legs aching. We stumbled out of the woods, onto the back lawn, and I slammed the door shut behind us, my hands shaking. For a moment there was silence, just the sound of our ragged breathing, the pounding of my heart. But as I looked at Olivia, I knew this wasn't over. Whatever was out there, whatever had lured us into the deep woods, it wasn't done with us yet. The door slammed shut behind us, but the cold grip of fear still clung to my skin. Olivia and I stood in the darkness of our kitchen, panting, trying to catch our breath. My fingers trembled against the wooden frame, and I could barely make out Olivia's wide-eyed expression in the dim light. The house was dark, and it wasn't just because the lights were off. It felt darker, like the shadows themselves had thickened, deepened. "Is it gone?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a shaky step closer to me, her phone light flickering across the room. "I don't know." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the words wavered. I glanced around, the flashlight casting long, twisting shadows. The air was too still, too cold. Something was wrong, more than just the power being out, more than the thing that had chased us. It was like the house itself had changed while we were gone. We moved cautiously, my hand reaching for the countertop as I tried to find some semblance of balance. Then we noticed the tracks, dark, muddy prints smeared across the floor. My stomach twisted into a knot, dread pooling in my gut. They weren't human. They were large, clawed, and they led from the front door to the kitchen, fading away as they neared the back hallway. Olivia and I exchanged a glance, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "What do we do?" Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. My mind raced, but I didn't have an answer. "Let's just see if Mom's here," I said, though my gut told me that wasn't what we were going to find. Something had changed in her, something that had lured us into those woods. We moved slowly, the light from Olivia's phone bobbing and casting flickering shadows across the walls. The scraping sound came first, a rhythmic dragging sound that made my skin crawl. It was coming from the kitchen. My throat tightened and I felt Olivia's hand grip my arm, her nails digging in. We inched forward, and the sight that met us in the dim glow of the flashlight made my blood run cold. Mom was there, standing at the center of the kitchen, her back to us. She was pushing a mop back and forth across the floor, but the motion was wrong. It was jerky, like a puppet on strings, the mop scraping uselessly against the floor. Her head hung at an odd angle, and her shoulders were hunched, her whole body trembling slightly with each movement. "Mom?" I managed, my voice cracking. She paused, her head lifting slightly, but she didn't turn around. The air grew colder, a chill settling into my bones. Slowly, she turned her head, her neck twisting unnaturally until her face was halfway towards us. Her eyes, once warm and full of life, were now hollow, dark, like two empty pits. Her mouth stretched into a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her lips pulling back to reveal crooked yellow teeth. "Your father, he's gone," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. The words hung in the air, a statement with no explanation, no feeling. Olivia whimpered beside me, and I could feel her starting to shake. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's head turned a little more, her body still facing away from us. The smile didn't falter, her empty gaze fixed on something far away. "He left us. He's not coming back." Her tone was almost cheerful, like she was sharing something trivial. The mop resumed its scraping, her body shifting back into that unnatural rhythm. I grabbed Olivia's hand, pulling her backward. I could feel her trembling, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "We need to go," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that wasn't our mother. Not anymore. We backed out of the kitchen, moving as quickly and quietly as we could. I could hear the scraping behind us, steady, unchanging, as if she hadn't noticed we were leaving. We made it to the stairs, and I pushed Olivia ahead of me, urging her up. The wood creaked beneath our feet, each sound echoing through the silent house. My heart pounded in my chest, fear clawing at my insides. Halfway up, the scraping stopped. Silence, the kind that made your skin prickle, made you hold your breath. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate. They echoed up the hallway, the sound of something dragging behind. Olivia looked back at me, her eyes wide with terror, and I knew we had to move faster. We reached the top of the stairs and I turned, catching a glimpse of the kitchen below. For a moment I saw her, her head tilted back, her eyes staring up at me, glowing faintly in the darkness. Her lips curled back, and she let out a low guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I shoved Olivia into my room, slamming the door shut behind us. The pounding on the door came almost instantly, hard, relentless, the sound of wood splintering. I could hear her voice, now filled with anger, snarling, demanding we let her in. The door shook under the force, the frame cracking. I didn't know what was happening, didn't know how this nightmare had started or how it would end. But as I looked at Olivia, I knew we couldn't stay here. Whatever was pretending to be our mother, it wanted us, and it wouldn't stop until it had us. "Out the window," I said, my voice trembling. We had to escape before it was too late. The cold night air hit us as we climbed out the window, the lattice swaying beneath our weight. My fingers gripped the vine-covered wood, and I glanced down at Olivia. She was moving quickly, her eyes wide, her breath coming in shallow gasps. I couldn't blame her. My own chest felt like it was going to explode from the fear that had wrapped itself around me like a vice. I kept my eyes on her, urging her down. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the leaves, and somewhere in the distance I heard it, that low guttural growl, echoing through the night. It sent a chill racing down my soul, and I pushed myself harder. We needed to get to the car, get out of here, before whatever was inside that house came after us. Olivia reached the ground first, her shoes landing with a soft thud in the grass. I followed, my feet slipping for a moment before I caught myself. I glanced back up at the window, half expecting to see that monstrous face staring down at us. But it was empty, dark. I didn't let myself dwell on it for too long. I grabbed Olivia's hand and we ran, our feet pounding across the lawn toward the driveway. The car was there, parked where I had left it earlier. I fumbled for the keys in my pocket, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped them. Olivia was already at the passenger door, her hand on the handle, her eyes darting back toward the house. She looked at me, her expression desperate. "Hurry," she urged, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I finally got the key into the lock, yanked the door open, and we both climbed in. I twisted the key in the ignition. The car roared to life, the headlights flickering on, illuminating the driveway, and what was in front of us. It was Mom, or at least it looked like her. She stood in the center of the driveway, her head tilted at that unnatural angle, her arms hanging limply at her sides. Her hollow eyes were fixed on us, and her mouth opened slowly, her lips parting as if she was trying to speak. My heart clenched, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a moment I hesitated. I could feel Olivia's eyes on me, her breath hitching in her throat. "What are you waiting for?" she asked, her voice cracking. "That's not Mom. You have to go." She was right. Deep down, I knew it. I took a deep breath, pressing my foot down on the gas. The car lurched forward, and the figure in front of us moved, almost gliding out of the way, her head snapping toward us as we passed. Her mouth twisted into a grin, a horrible toothy grin that seemed to stretch too far across her face. I heard Olivia let out a choked sob beside me, and I pressed the gas harder, the tires spinning in the gravel as we sped away from the house. The road stretched out before us, winding through the darkness, the headlights illuminating only a few feet ahead. My hands were trembling, my heart still pounding in my ears. Olivia was silent beside me, her eyes fixed on the road, her face pale. I glanced at her, trying to find the right words, but what could I say? Nothing about this was okay. Nothing about this made sense. The car's headlights caught movement up ahead, a flash of something dark darting across the road. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as we skidded to a stop. For a moment, everything was silent, and I held my breath, my eyes scanning the darkness. Olivia let out a soft whimper, her hand gripping the edge of her seat. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I shook my head, my eyes darting back and forth, searching for any sign of movement. The woods were thick here, the shadows deep, and I could feel something watching us from the darkness. Then there it was again, a shadow shifting between the trees, a flash of red eyes. I felt a wave of terror wash over me, my breath catching in my throat. It was following us. Whatever it was, whatever had come for us in the woods, it wasn't done yet. I pressed the gas again, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. The car jerked forward, and I drove, faster this time, my eyes locked on the road ahead. I didn't know where we were going, just away from the house, away from the thing that had taken our mother. The road twisted and turned, the trees pressing in on either side, their branches like claws reaching for us. Olivia was silent, her eyes wide, her body tense. I could still hear that growl in my head, still see the way her eyes had glowed in the darkness. We had to get away, but as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw them, those red eyes, glowing in the darkness, following us, relentless. And I knew, deep down, that we couldn't run forever. We drove until the road seemed to stretch into oblivion, until the headlights began to blur in my tired eyes. The world outside the car was dark, an endless black that pressed in on us from all sides. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat, an endless pulse that seemed to synchronize with the tension in the car. Olivia hadn't said a word since we left the house, her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes staring blankly at the road ahead. After what felt like hours, I finally pulled off onto a narrow gravel road that led to a small clearing. The car rolled to a stop, and I killed the engine. Silence swallowed us, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. Olivia finally looked over at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. There was a tremor there, a fear that mirrored my own. I swallowed, looking out into the blackness of the forest that surrounded us. The trees stood tall and unmoving, their branches like skeletal arms reaching up to the sky. "We wait," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to me. I didn't know what else to say. We were lost, not just in the physical sense, but in every possible way. Our home was gone. Our mother, whatever had happened to her, was gone. And the only thing I knew for sure was that we couldn't go back. Olivia nodded, her eyes shifting back to the windshield, staring out at the darkness. "You think it's still out there?" she asked after a long moment, her voice trembling. I didn't have to ask what she meant. I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. "Yeah, it's out there." The words felt heavy, like admitting it made it more real. I could still see those eyes, those red, glowing eyes, watching us from the shadows. It had followed us, and I knew it wouldn't stop, not until it got what it wanted. I reached over, taking Olivia's hand in mine. Her fingers were cold, her grip tight. "We'll figure this out," I said, though I didn't know if I believed it myself. The fear in her eyes was mirrored in my own, and I knew we were running out of time. The forest was quiet, too quiet. There was no rustling of leaves, no distant calls of animals, just silence, pressing in on us, suffocating. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of movement, any hint that we weren't alone. But there was nothing, only the sound of our breathing, ragged and uneven. Then I heard it, a rustling, faint but unmistakable. My eyes snapped open, and I looked at Olivia. She heard it too. Her eyes were wide, her body tense. The sound came again, closer this time, a soft shuffling, like something moving through the leaves. "Do you hear that?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The rustling grew louder, closer, and then I saw them, two glowing red eyes, staring at us from the edge of the clearing. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt Olivia's hand tighten around mine. It was here. It had found us. I didn't think. I just moved. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The eyes blinked, and then they were gone, swallowed by the shadows. I pressed the gas pedal, the car lurching forward, the tires spinning in the gravel as we sped away from the clearing. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't care. All I knew was that we couldn't stay there, that whatever was out there, it wasn't going to stop until it had us. The road twisted and turned, the trees blurring past, and I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel. "We have to tell someone," Olivia said, her voice shaking. "We can't keep running." I nodded, my throat tight. She was right. We needed help. But who would believe us? Who would believe any of this? I glanced at her, her face pale in the dim light of the dashboard. "We will," I said, though I didn't know how. "We'll find someone. We'll make them listen." The red eyes were still in my mind, haunting me, relentless. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but as long as we were alive, as long as we had each other, we had a chance. And I was going to fight. For Olivia, for whatever was left of our family. I pressed the gas harder, the car speeding down the dark winding road, and I made a silent promise, to myself, to Olivia, to whatever was out there watching us. We weren't going to be its victims, not tonight. I woke up with a jolt, my eyes snapping open in the dark. Something was wrong. It wasn't the cold or the rustling of the wind through the trees. No, it was something else. Then it hit me, the smell. It was thick and heavy like rotting meat, but much worse. It made my stomach twist, and I could almost taste it as I breathed in. I glanced at my watch. It was 2 a.m. My heart started to race, and I lay there, staring up at the dark ceiling of my tent, trying to figure out what could be causing that horrible stench. Living out here in the woods, I was used to strange smells. Small animals died all the time, and nature took care of them. But this was different. This smelled like something big, something really dead, and it was close. I grabbed my bear spray just in case. Bears could smell a carcass from miles away, and if there was something dead nearby, it could bring one right to my camp. The minutes dragged by, and the smell just kept getting worse. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the sounds of the night, but every time I took a breath, it filled my nose. I felt a growing sense of unease, a chill that wasn't from the cold. Then I heard it, a crunch, a soft, deliberate crunch of leaves, coming from the hill just beyond my tent. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. It wasn't the random rustling of an animal. It was slow, steady, footsteps, and it was coming closer. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I held my breath, listening. The steps were getting nearer, one slow crunch after another. They weren't heavy like a bear's. They were careful, almost like a person. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. Who would be out here at this hour, in the middle of nowhere? The footsteps stopped. Silence. I lay there, straining to hear, my fingers gripping the bear spray so tight they hurt. Then, snap. A twig broke right next to my tent. My breath caught in my throat. Whatever it was close. Too close. The stench was overpowering now, thick and choking. I could barely think straight, my senses overwhelmed by the smell and the fear. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just lay there, waiting, every nerve in my body screaming. I could hear something. Soft, raspy breathing, almost like a wheeze. It was right outside. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts blurring together. What was it? A bear, a person, something else? Minutes felt like hours, and time seemed to stretch on forever. I waited for something to happen, for the tent to move, for whatever was out there to make its move. But nothing happened. Slowly, the breathing faded away. The footsteps retreated, crunching softly back into the woods. I didn't dare move until I saw the first light of dawn. When the sky finally started to lighten, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I reached for the zipper, my hands trembling, and slowly unzipped the tent. The forest was still, the air cold and crisp. The horrible smell was gone, and everything seemed normal, except it wasn't. I stepped out of my tent, my headlamp cutting through the morning mist. The woods felt different, like they were hiding something. The silence was too heavy, too expectant, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I looked around, searching for any sign of what had been there. But there was nothing. Just the trees, the rocks, and the feeling that something had been watching me. Something that was still out there, waiting. The sun was up now, and the forest was bathed in a soft, golden light. Everything looked peaceful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and decided to look around. I had to find out what caused that awful smell last night. Maybe it was just a dead animal and I was overreacting. I had to know. I started walking in a circle around my camp, my eyes scanning the ground for anything out of place. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the usual rocks and fallen branches. But as I moved further away from my tent, I noticed something strange. There were large rocks, each about the size of a basketball, that had been moved. They were scattered in a rough line, leading down the hill. It was like someone, or something, had rolled them there. My stomach tightened, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The rocks were heavy, too heavy for a small animal to move. I knelt down and touched one of them. It was cold, and there were deep marks in the dirt where it had been pulled out of the ground. I looked around, my heart pounding again. Who would do this, and why? The smell from last night was gone, but the memory of it lingered. I could still almost taste it, and it made me feel sick just thinking about it. I stood up and followed the line of rocks down the hill. They led me to a small clearing, where the ground was disturbed. The dirt was churned up, like something had been digging there. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the ground. There were no footprints, no signs of an animal. Just the rocks and the disturbed earth. It didn't make any sense. I knelt down again, running my fingers through the loose dirt. It was soft, like it had been freshly dug. I looked around, my senses on high alert. The forest was still, too still. It felt like the trees were watching me, like they were waiting for something to happen. I stood up, my heart pounding in my ears. I had to get out of there. I turned and started back up the hill, my eyes darting from side to side. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves made my heart skip a beat. I felt like I was being watched, like something was following me. I tried to shake the feeling, to tell myself it was just my imagination, but it wouldn't go away. When I finally made it back to my camp, I felt a rush of relief. I packed up my things as quickly as I could, my hands shaking. I had to leave. I didn't know what was out there, but I knew I didn't want to be around when it came back. The forest felt wrong, like it was hiding something dark and terrible. I didn't look back as I walked away. the feeling of being watched never leaving me. Something had been there last night, something that wanted me to know it was there, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out what it was. The next few days were restless. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the woods. My mind kept replaying every sound, every smell, every moment of that terrifying night. I knew it wasn't a bear. Whatever had been out there was something else, something that seemed more intelligent, something that wanted me to know it was there. The feeling gnawed at me, keeping me up at night, my heart pounding at every little noise. I spent hours online, searching for anything that could explain what I had experienced. Stories about strange encounters in the woods, unexplained smells, noises, and feelings of being watched. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old legend that something clicked. The Wendigo. The word sent a shiver down my spine. I read everything I could find. Stories of an evil spirit that haunted the woods, a creature that smelled of decay, that stalked its prey and took pleasure in terrifying them. The more I read, the more it all made sense. The horrible stench, the deliberate footsteps, the rocks that had been moved. It was as if the Wendigo had been toying with me, testing my fear. My stomach twisted as I thought about it. The breathing I had heard outside my tent, the twig that had snapped so close to me. It wasn't an animal. It was something far worse, something that enjoyed my fear, something that fed on it. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, waiting. I tried to convince myself that it was all just a story, just an old legend, but deep down, I knew better. The woods had always been my sanctuary, my place of peace, but now they felt different. They felt tainted, like they were hiding something dark and terrible. I knew I had to go back. I had to see for myself if it was real, if the Wendigo was really out there. The next morning, I packed my gear and headed back to the woods. My heart pounded as I approached the area where I had camped before. The sun was bright, the air crisp, but the feeling of dread was still there, like a heavy weight pressing down on me. I made my way back to the clearing where I had found the disturbed earth. The rocks were still there, the ground still churned up, but the air was different. It was quiet, too quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. I stood there, my eyes scanning the trees, my ears straining for any sound. The feeling of being watched was back, stronger than ever. I could feel it, something out there, hiding in the shadows, waiting. My heart raced, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew I wasn't alone. The Wendigo was out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I turned and started to walk away, my steps quickening as the feeling of dread grew stronger. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I knew that if I did, I might see it, lurking in the shadows, its eyes fixed on me, its hunger growing. And I wasn't ready to face it, not yet. Living in the middle of nowhere has its perks, but lately I've started to feel more alone than free. Our little house in Coos Bay, Oregon, is surrounded by thick woods that stretch on forever. Sometimes it's peaceful, but other times, like when it's dark and the wind howls through the trees, it feels like the shadows are watching me. I guess it all started on one of those stormy nights. I was lying in bed trying to sleep when I heard it. 3 loud knocks on my window, clear, spaced out, each one echoing in the silence. My heart skipped a beat. I remember just lying there for a second, too scared to move. But curiosity got the better of me. I took a deep breath and slowly reached for the curtain, my fingers trembling as I pulled it back. Nothing. Just the dark forest staring back at me, the branches swaying in the wind. A chill ran down my neck, and I quickly shut the curtain, trying to shake off the feeling that something had been there. I lay awake for hours, listening, waiting, but the rest of the night was quiet, almost too quiet, and eventually I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I went outside, and that's when I saw them, muddy boot prints right under my window. They were big, much bigger than my feet, and they led off into the woods. I stared at them for a while, a knot forming in my stomach. Someone had been there last night watching me. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank, or maybe one of the new neighbors, but it didn't sit right with me. The whole day, I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling. Later, as I was skateboarding home from school, I saw him. A man, standing just at the edge of the woods, half hidden behind the trees. He was too far away for me to see his face clearly, but he was staring right at me. His posture was stiff, almost unnatural. I tried to ignore him, tried to tell myself it was just some guy, but I could feel his eyes on me the entire way home. That night, I was lying in bed again, trying to forget about the boot prints and the man in the woods. I was almost asleep when I heard it. Another knock. This one was louder, more insistent. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I knew I couldn't just lie there. I had to do something. I reached under my bed, my fingers finding the cold metal of my dad's old pistol. I grabbed my flashlight too, my hand shaking as I clicked it on. I threw open the door and stepped outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. My breath fogged up in front of me as I scanned the tree line, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Then I saw it, a figure, running towards the woods. It moved fast, faster than any person should be able to. I don't know why, but I followed. Maybe I was angry. Maybe I was just tired of being scared. I don't know. I ran after him, the flashlight bouncing in my hand, casting long twisted shadows around me. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my heart jump, but I kept going. I had to know who, or what, was out there. The forest felt alive, like it was closing in on me, the branches reaching out, trying to pull me back. But I pressed on, the figure always just ahead, always just out of reach. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness of the woods. I stood there panting, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest was silent again, the only sound my racing heartbeat. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. I turned and ran back home, the flashlight flickering, the feeling of being watched never leaving me. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about the knocks, the boot prints, the figure in the woods. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever it wasn't over. And deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning of something far more terrifying. The next few days were a blur. I kept replaying everything over and over in my head. The knocks, the boot prints, that shadowy figure running into the woods. I didn't tell my parents. They'd either tell me it was just my imagination, or even worse, they'd start to worry. So I kept it to myself, trying to convince myself that maybe it was all just a bad dream. But deep down, I knew better. Something was out there, and it wasn't done with me. One evening, I decided I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around, waiting for the next knock on my window. I needed answers. So I grabbed my flashlight again, along with my dad's pistol, and headed into the woods. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the sky was a dark blue, fading quickly into black. The trees looked like towering shadows, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. My breath felt heavy as I made my way through the underbrush, every crack of a twig beneath my feet echoing through the silence. I followed the same path I'd taken that night, the memory of that figure leading me deeper and deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, and the further I went, the more the world around me seemed to change. The forest felt off, like it was tense, waiting for something to happen. Then I saw it, the mouth of a cave, half hidden behind a cluster of bushes. It was wide, dark, and looked like it could swallow me whole. A shiver ran down my spine, but I forced myself forward. I had to know what was inside. I stepped up to the entrance, my flashlight beam flickering, as if it knew something I didn't. Just as I was about to step inside, a cougar burst out of the darkness, almost knocking me over. I stumbled back, my heart leaping into my throat. The cougar's eyes were wide, and it took off into the woods, as if it was running from something inside that cave. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run home and never look back. But I couldn't. I had come this far. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the smell of damp earth and something rotting hitting me immediately. The air was thick, heavy, and my flashlight barely cut through the darkness. I moved slowly, each step echoing, the beam of light dancing across the rough stone walls. Strange, dark stains marked the cave, and I felt like the shadows were pressing in on me from all sides. And then I saw him, the man, or whatever he was, standing there deeper in the cave. He wasn't moving, just staring at me. My flashlight flickered, and in that split second, I saw his face. He was wearing a mask, twisted into an expression of pure agony, the eyes behind it glowing a deep, unnatural red. My blood ran cold. He was too still, his limbs too long, his posture all wrong. Everything in me screamed to run, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring back at him, my body frozen in place. Finally, I forced myself to raise the pistol, my hand shaking so badly I could barely aim. I pulled the trigger, the shot echoing through the cave, deafening in the confined space. I missed. The man didn't even flinch. He just moved, fast, faster than I could follow, darting past me and out of the cave. I turned, my flashlight catching only a glimpse of him disappearing into the woods, his movements jerky, almost insect-like. I stumbled out of the cave, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The forest was silent again, but I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. I turned and ran, my flashlight flickering, the darkness around me seeming to close in. By the time I got back home, I was out of breath, my entire body shaking. I slammed the door behind me, locking it, my back pressed against the wood as I tried to catch my breath. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mask, those glowing red eyes. I didn't know who or what that was, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over, not even close. After that night in the cave, nothing felt the same. It was like the world had shifted, and now everything had a dark edge. I couldn't focus in school. Every little noise made me jump. A door slamming, a book dropping. My heart would leap, and I'd be back in that cave staring into those glowing red eyes. The feeling of being watched never left me, even during the day. I stopped hanging out with friends, stopped skating around the neighborhood. I just wanted to be inside, where I thought I might be safe. But even home didn't feel like a refuge anymore. Every night, I'd lie awake, my ears straining for any sound outside my window. I could almost feel the knocks coming, hear the slow, deliberate tapping in my mind. I tried to tell myself that whatever it was gone. That the shot I fired had scared it off. But deep down, I knew better. It was waiting. It was always waiting. One night, after another day spent in a daze, I finally broke. I needed answers. I needed to know what I was dealing with. So I grabbed my laptop and started searching. I went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, reading about strange encounters, ghost stories, urban legends, anything that might explain what I had seen. And then I found it. The word was there, staring back at me from the screen. Wendigo. My eyes skimmed over the description, and my blood ran cold. A monstrous creature from Native American folklore, twisted by an insatiable hunger, driven to stalk and consume. The glowing red eyes, the grotesque mask, the distorted limbs, it all matched. It felt like someone had taken that night and written it down. My chest tightened, and a shiver ran through me as I scrolled through the accounts of those who claimed to have seen one. It wasn't just the stories that got to me, it was the way they ended. Each one left me with the same sense of dread. No one ever really escaped. The Wendigo always came back. I sat there staring at my screen, the light from the laptop the only thing illuminating my room. I didn't want to believe it, but it made too much sense. What else could it have been? I tried to tell myself that monsters weren't real, that things like the Wendigo were just stories. But I had seen it. I had heard the knocks, chased it through the woods, and stared into those glowing eyes. I knew it was real, and I knew it was still out there. That night, I barely slept. My mind was filled with the stories I had read, the warnings, the descriptions of the creature. Every noise outside made my heart pound. I kept expecting to hear those knocks again, To see that figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching me. The fear was constant, gnawing at me, a reminder that I wasn't safe. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling never left. I'd catch myself staring out the window, my eyes scanning the tree line, waiting for a glimpse of movement. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I had to get out. My parents thought it was just a phase, that I was acting out or struggling with something I couldn't put into words. They didn't understand that this wasn't just anxiety or a fear I could talk away. This was real, and it was dangerous. Eventually, I convinced them to move. I told them I needed a change, that I couldn't stand being in the middle of nowhere anymore. They didn't ask too many questions, and I was grateful for that. We moved to Colorado, to a neighborhood with more people, more lights, more noise, somewhere that didn't feel so isolated. But even here, the memory lingers. I still feel it sometimes, that sense of being watched, the fear that one day I'll hear those knocks again. I know it's out there, somewhere, waiting. Always be aware when going into the woods. You never know what you will encounter. Stay safe out there. Thank you for listening to Night Whispers. If the shadows kept you company tonight, leave a comment. Tell me where in the world you're listening from. And if you're brave enough, like, subscribe, and come back next time. Just don't follow the voice in the trees.